Hello, I'm Chris from Airwindows, and we're going to do some coding today. I'm a little bit late, just a moment. I'm bouncing around doing various things. Bear with me. Let me see, what the hell am I even doing? Oh dear, this has been a weird morning. Not necessarily in a bad way. Let's see, close the two-step verification tab. YouTube had me bouncing around all different kinds of accounts because I was signed in for two-step verification, which they forced me to do, and insisted that they were going to kill my account if I didn't, basically. And then didn't acknowledge that I was signed in for verification. So I had to go and do it for an entirely different account, and then it bounced into here and worked fine first time. So miracles happen, I guess. Anyways, let me start trying to get my crap together. This might be a weird day, but I'll tell you all about my stories about what's going on after I set up my picture-in-picture so you can see my coding screen. And what else am I doing? Oh, is this what else I'm doing? We have a chat window. Say hi, chat. Hi, chat. So yeah, I'm going to try to place my things where I can reach them. Firstly, my coffee. And tell you what I was doing this morning where I got off to such a late start. You may be able to see flashing lights behind me, which is not my usual deal for coding streams, and I'll tell you why. I'm in the middle of something important that I'm having to put off in order to do this coding, which is also important. And it's, hey Rose. And I forgot to tell Rosemary that I was streaming after saying that she could join me on the stream. So yeah, we'll take a few minutes and I'll bring you up to speed on why this is one of my more frazzled mornings. It's not necessarily for bad reasons. Granted, some of it's for bad reasons. YouTube making me jump through hoops counts as bad reasons. I'm not happy about that. I think I've got it sorted. It's always this danger that if I don't do it right, they'll take my account away or whatever. There'll be like two-factor authentication or death. And that's one of those situations where there's nothing I can do about it. So, hi, my coding laptop won't stretch over to where I need to reach it. And I can't make my mouse work here, so we're just going to be in a world of awkwardness. Oh yeah, I'm very happy with Ryan from Bespoke. Oh. Hey, got a little more stretch on my cables. I'm able to do the coding thing now. Yeah, and Paul from Surge Synthesizer, don't underestimate Bacon Paul. He is phenomenal and super duper helpful. So yeah, YouTube made me jump through hoops, and I think we're good to go. I think I've got it set up so that they're not going to give me a really hard time every time I try to go live. But I wasn't starting going live quite at the time that I could have. And that's because, see the blinking lights behind me? I've been doing samples again. One of the things I've been telling the Bespoke folks is that they can go and download my old drum samples. Bespoke turns out to have a neat way of being able to use drum samples where you can point this doohickey with like drum pads, and you can tell it to respond to different MIDI notes, so you can drive it in any number of ways. You could play it with a keyboard, you can play it with a sequencer, and you can also, with this conglomeration of stuff that we use, move the drum patterns around in time, which is something I find very difficult to do on the analog system. I have to buy literal modules to do that, delay the attack of the drum sequences. And in Bespoke, you turn it on and it just lets you do it. That's super helpful. And Bespoke comes with a set of drum samples that I think are very, I don't want to say mean things. I didn't like the drum samples that it came with. And Ryan, who does it, ended up setting up a feature which has been very useful to me about randomizing the drum samples. Since he didn't have samples that were like absolutely killer every time, at least I don't think they were, he set up a thing where you point the player to a little folder of samples and then you can hit a random button and it will pick a random thing in the folder. In fact, I believe you can set it up so that every time it launches, it picks a random thing to start with. And that's a way of starting off with a different set of sounds each time. And I had a set of drum samples from acoustic drums. In some cases, ones where I had run my good preamplifier directly into the audio chips of an old ADAT back in the day, because that's all I had to record with the old ADAT back in the day. Let me see if I can fool around with this stuff a little bit too. I would like to cover up my face on the screen so that I'm not distracted. I always mentioned that, and because it's always relevant. And we'll make chat be visible, and I actually still have my face showing on a screen, but that's okay. I can make it not move by pausing it. So I let the Bespoke folks have all of my old drum samples. I dug up the 24-bit originals of all of these samples and pointed them at about 1.5 gigabytes of samples where all the individual ones, the individual drum hits, were arranged by velocity, because they originally were an instrument. They were originally a software instrument that you're supposed to load in something like Logic. And it was mapped to a keyboard, so if you hit the keyboard softly, you would have a... Why is this on? You gotta give me some slack today, or maybe lots of slack today, because I'm needing lots of slack today. The folders of drum samples were numbered. So you had like hi-hat open 007, hi-hat open 049, hi-hat open 127, and those were velocity samples. And yep, I can point you at the, or I can promise to make a post on airwindows.com pointing you to the folder that I gave them, because I gave them a link on MediaFire, and they are hosting that for me. It was originally less than 1.5 gigs, and then I went in and found all of the other stuff where I had the samples I was working with numbered by velocity, but organized in individual folders, which happens to be exactly what you use for putting it into Bespoke. And learning that, I went, oh, okay, well, this is very obvious. I should just give them all of this because it works immediately, just, perfectly, just the way you want it. And so I did that, but that doesn't include current day drum samples of synthesizer instrument. It doesn't include my stuff over here, like my kick drums. I've bought modular synthesizer kick drums this whole time. I've got a Blue Lantern Asteroid BD, which I modified by changing the capacitors in it. I've got a Blue Lantern Accented Asteroid BD, which I modified by changing capacitors in it and So much so that some of the settings are actually broken and don't work, and other settings do. And I have a Blue Lantern Asteroid mini synthesizer, which is like a kick drum, only more so. And I have a Moog DFAM, and that's a exceptionally good kick. So I spent the morning running about 1 pulse per second into these and capturing them into the Lavry. I captured them into a really good analog to digital converter, and in so doing, I had to doctor my entire setup so that it was clocking off of the Lavry and being able to capture properly, and so I did that as well. And that's not correctly set up for doing my live streaming, so I had to take it all apart and put it back in order to be able to do the live streaming, and that's why I was late. And then I was more late because Google wouldn't let me start the YouTube live chat because they kept saying turn on two-factor authentication when I already had last week. So having solved that, and boy, people are running away from this chat. No concurrent viewers practically. I'll start, I'm not even worried about it. Anybody who is down with these coding chats, I will start coding, but people are probably learning that I don't get rolling immediately. And maybe people are having connection issues or something. Because boy, howdy, my connection appears to be fine, but something is terribly wrong as far as people sticking around on the chat. I don't know what's going on there. Well, tell me in chat if it's incredibly annoying. I can grab this other mouse and have a look at OBS and see if I'm still streaming effectively. Yeah, I appear to be still streaming. It's only been like 12 minutes. Maybe it's just people are still filing in, as it were. I don't really know. Anywho, that was this morning. Today's going to be a big day. I've got a number of things in mind. One of the things I'm getting is I have a ribbon microphone coming today if all goes well. I have a Beyer M500. And the reason I'm excited about this is that I should be able to take, hang on, this little microphone. It's a Sennheiser Electret. It's for a lavalier mic. And do a stereo recording with this and various kinds of vocal microphones. Oh, well then maybe my concurrent viewers on this studio view screen is completely broken. I don't know, maybe it is. I would not put it past YouTube to basically be conning me as far as how many viewers are there or not. There's no telling what's going on there. That's one of those things where I'm super not in control of any of it. I will take a moment and peek at my cell phone. See if I have any messages there. Nope. Google's not sending me any messages either, other than it did have to send me a message to turn on the two-factor authentication for a second account in order to be able to do this at all. So, when I get this vocal mic, assuming it works, it is possible that I will have to send it back to Beyer to be re-ribboned if it is not functional. I'm hoping it's functional. It's a notable live mic in which it's actually a mic that the Eagles used a fair bit early on. And it's the type of mic that was used to record the drum sounds in When the Levee Breaks by Led Zeppelin, stuff like that. And I've not owned a ribbon mic before. The reason I chose this one, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this has also got some similarities with the vocal mic that Phil Collins liked to use in his 80s stuff when he went into that Allen and Heath microphone compressor that's not really designed for music purposes. And that's another piece of equipment that I need to get a hold of because I have a plugin, Pop, that's modeled after what that did. And I really kind of need to mimic that vocal chain, duplicate that vocal chain, so that I can get the plugin more accurate to what was actually there. Jazz, on topic of ADC, I made an algorithm to emulate SP1200 ADC and DAC. If you like, I can email it to you the pseudocode, but I'm afraid it includes resampler. Good for you. I'm going to make my own. But good for you, and by all means, anybody interested in this, look up Jazz. Figure out a way to publicize that. As you know, I'm completely open source. So what you want to do is find a way to communicate that to people. And you may certainly use my chat to do it. Meanwhile, I've got other things to do today, namely, I just put out YHighpass. And you might remember that from here. I'll play some stuff here. And this is what we made. And I have released it so that this is something now that you can have today. Airwindows, YHighpass. And there's our Alien Kittens audio. And we can make it much more resonant. So I made this, and I tried something which I hadn't tried before I started actually making the video, which is usually my way. I was setting it up. I wasn't literally recording at the time. But I tried something where I was going to use YHighpass to duplicate the filters on my Alpha Juno, because that creates a neat sort of distorty sound that's better than most filters I know of. And I stacked up two of them doing it, and then I discovered something which I'm going to be working on today. What I discovered was when I put one of these filters aside, like if I hit bypass, like that, in Bespoke, or was doing other things, and stopped using the filter that had previously been working and doing stuff, it started eating lots of CPU. And there's some specific meaning behind what that is. What that means is, or you could also do that by putting the gain to 0 like this. And if you do that and it starts eating lots of CPU, what's happening is something in the algorithm is generating tiny, tiny little numbers. It's dividing the numbers down sample by sample. And if you're making it use 0 as an input, it'll be gradually making them smaller and smaller. Whereas if you're using what's called an IIR filter, which is infinite impulse response, that's like taking a filter, making a filter out of like current sample is the last sample divided by 2 plus the new one again. And if you do that, what you've got is remainders of what you used to have in the audio path getting smaller and smaller as they go. Which is fine. It's all fine and well and good. But if you've got one of the computers that will try to generate or try to keep track of these numbers even as they get impossibly tiny, sometimes they will start to denormalize. What denormalize means is the processing wants to keep track of what the numbers really truly are, even when they're incredibly tiny. So it starts doing some extra stuff to keep track of it. Rather than just doing the normal calculations, it kind of goes above and beyond, and by God, it's going to keep track of what those numbers really are. But that starts eating CPU like crazy because it's doing extra work to take into account audio that if you measured it, that would be like 400 dB down. It's stuff where it's literally so close to 0 that you can't tell what's going on. It's not going to ever be reachable by audio, by the human ear, or by the computer or anything. It's just nearly 0 numbers doing their thing. And I have something in here that addresses that, but it's not addressing it enough. And funnily enough, when I'm demoing this stuff, remember we have gain. I can do these things on this antique laptop, this old laptop where it's like a 2.5 gig Intel Core i5 with only 8 gigs of RAM. But this is not having any problem with this stuff. And yet when I run it on the bigger machine, my desktop, in Bespoke, and do stuff with it, it ends up eating like 70% CPU. And it's a powerful desktop, much more powerful than this old laptop, but for whatever reason, that one is causing the denormalization. And as you can hear, this one is actually able to run this stuff. I don't know why that is. Maybe it has to do with being the audio unit versus the VST, I don't really know. But I do know that I have a way to deal with it. So what we're going to do is dig into that. And the first thing I'm going to do is open up YHighpass, which is the one that I'm going to be building today. It'll be here. Oh, look, there's one there already. And I'll move this over to here where I place the finished products. And the first thing I'm going to do is open up, I can't, my mouse isn't letting me move it around very well. I have a very cramped, my desktop is all cramped and all of the things are in the wrong place and whatever. I'm going to open up the old YLowPass that I did before and copy it over, except for I may hang on to HighPass information. Doing this with little awkward motions because I can only move the mouse a half an inch. And we're going to copy all of this stuff from here and make YHighpass, which previously was just, I'll show you what it was. There's virtually nothing here. This is basically just what I started with. And I don't remember whether I incorporated everything in YLowPass that I could have. Looks like I did. See this bit that says biquad total or fixed total? That's one of the things I wanted to incorporate. That's not in the new version. That's not in, this is the new version. That's not in this version. This version is all using just raw numbers to do this stuff. So basically what I'm going to want to do is hang on to some of this information like this. I'm going to drag that to the desktop because I'm probably going to want to switch out the newer stuff with this HighPass because the original, what I'm working with is this, and I need to change it to this and then adjust it to fit to make YHighpass actually be YHighpass. But firstly, we're going to work on this. This bit that I selected here is the bit that I'm going to change today. And I'm going to work on that first before I get into doing the actual HighPass stuff. So my first order of business here is to gather my thoughts and be ready for anything today. All the things like making the new drum samples. Honestly, I had this running into the computer and was monitoring it good and loud, and whether it was the DFAM samples or the initial Blue Lantern samples, and the reason that stuff is still on is I'm not done. I have more sampling to do today. I'm going to have to go over to that once I'm finished doing this. But the results I was getting were very nice. The Blue Lantern stuff was coming across really good. The DFAM stuff, I got everything from snares to a variety of different kinds of kicks. Sometimes I had modulators moving all of the parameters. the Blue Lantern stuff, when I was doing the accident bass drum, the way I've got it set up, remember this is one that I modified by changing capacitors in it so that it doesn't act like the store-bought one. It had a tendency to have this overly sustainy kick drum, and the last thing that I did was starting to modulate the control with my fingers while it was playing. So it would hit the drum and I would drop the frequency by twisting the control, causing it to cut off and run out of steam. And since I was not doing this while actually making music, I was able to turn my attention to manipulating the control for each drum hit, as if that was all I had to do. And I think I got at least one or two, probably even more, absolutely killer sustainy drum hits off of that particular configuration. And since I'm making drum samples, made of win, absolutely made of win. These are going to be really killer samples to let people have, and I'm excited about that. I'm also excited about the Beyer M500 coming. And also, at the end of today, I need to do another song for the guy whose album I'm mixing. And we kind of started with the difficult ones. So I have a good feeling about it's not going to pose me any problems. It's going to be positive and exciting, and it's going to work out great. But this is definitely a very big day. And we're going to try to stick with it and see what we get. First order of business, let's see what our version number looks like. It says YHip. I think that translates to YHighpass, and so that's going to be correct. If I hadn't done it, it would say question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, and I would need to fix that. Second thing, let's see what we've got in our high-pass H file and compare it with the low-pass H file. And you know one thing I think I might choose to do? Let's just take this and make it a clone of Y low-pass for now. I don't think I need all 10 sliders, because the things I'm going to be fooling with aren't going to be slider type things so much. So we're going to copy this directly. Then line this up, paste it, and now that's in line with the way the sliders need to go. Then look further down in here. In the audio unit, the top and bottom here are all I need to change. In the VST, there's 3 files to work with, but with the audio unit, it's really kind of only 2. Unless you also count the one where you have to change the question mark, question mark, question mark to the identification number. Doing this kind of stuff, there's all kinds of things you got to keep track of. It's just the way of it. Note the little thing down here that I'm not copying. See how it says uint32t fpd? What that means is unsigned int 32-bit. 32-bit means it gets to go up to quite a high number. And unsigned means they're all positive. It goes from 0 to a very high integer number. And we're going to paste that in here where this other stuff was. And as you can see, the same thing is there. You can also see that I'm doing the enums. I'm enumerating different words. These count as words, indicating particular identification numbers for things, because enum means start at 0 and go on. This one means 0, this one means 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And then if you've done that, and you're using things like arrays, like biquad here, and looking up what the arrays do or mean, then what you can do is talk about things being by reso rather than talking about things being array number 1. And so it's a bit of an identifying thing. Like these stay the same way. They stay the way they are. I'm not sure whether they are by default a const. I think they may very well be. If you write const in front of something, what that means is it's not going to get changed, and so the compiler gets to do things with it that are different from if it was a number that needed to get changed. All this stuff needs to get changed as you go. But if you go const long double, then that implies it's a number that's going to stay the same every time you look at it. And that is YHighpass H. I think first order of business, I'm going to make this work. And that means, well, let's also look up here. That has only this number of parameters. And then I'm going to want to copy this stuff as well. And start making this be what it needs to be. As you can see, it's not lighting these things up in blue, meaning that those are not a thing to this program at this time. And we see the same thing here, where this is in blue and this is not, because we don't actually have, and this is not, we don't actually have a kparam 7 at this time. So we're going to go through and take these out, because they're not used. And then we're going to go here and replace this thing, which is the previous version, with what I took from the other one. And then go back one more time. And I think this is recent enough that I can just literally take everything in this kernel. See, it says low pass kernel. Everything from there on down. And if I just paste it in, it'll contain all of the same stuff that's supplied to me in the template. Can you see them? I don't know. I don't know what that means. I'm a bit confused. So I'm replacing all of this stuff because a lot of it is identical. It's recent enough that my template covers that. And since that was the last thing, I'm going to close the low pass, build this and see if it builds right off. Probably it does. It seems to. Give it another go. And now let's take this and see if this is a duplicate of our plugin that we were doing just a bit before. Here's a drum sound. This is similar to this drum sounds that I'm giving people for samples. Scan all the way to the bottom here. And now we have a YHighpass. In fact, we have all those things, but not all of them are real. And it just didn't show me that. So let me see whether I did it right or not and what's going on there. I might have some further fixing to do. So we're selecting Audio Units VST, Airwindows, YHighpass. This is supposed to open a window if it's not totally broken. There it goes. And having done that, this is supposed to now be the same as YLowPass. And it sure seems to be the same as YLowPass. So the next thing we're going to do, I have some experiments to make here. And I'll show you what they are. We're going to make an effect stack, because that's what Twisted Wave does. Oh, that's fine. And I'm going to do two things here. Firstly, YHighpass is the thing I'm working with, so we're going to add that. doesn't really matter what I do with it at this stage. And then we're going to add another thing. We're going to add a crazy distortion for a reason that will become apparent momentarily. Macity should do fine. Macity has loads of gain on tap. I could also do Mac EQ if I felt like it, but Macity's probably fine. And oh look, it instantiates as full crank. That means we can add a lot of gain here. And we can even do gain here too. So now we've got a super duper high gain thing, and we're going to save this stack because I'm going to need to refer to it. I'm calling it noise floor test. Because you remember the problem I've been having with a number of different things, honestly, but in particular, YHighpass gave me this problem. Well, oh, Halon official, I have made a channel strip in the past. Go and use C-strip. Is that on my desktop computer, this is causing denormalization problems when I don't have audible sound in here. So what we're doing is, we did save that, did we? Noise floor test, yep. And in fact, I can indeed reload it, and there it is. And if I play this, crazy loud. So what we're going to do now is close the effect stack thing. I'm going to save this as noise floor test also. And this is a nice long file. And then we're going to make those things be silence. And this be a nice little fade out. So now when we play this, it'll play for a little tiny bit. And then it's going to fade out. And then we've got a whole bunch of nothing. And if I put this on our noise floor test, we're going to get a result. We're going to get this. Notice how now it's quiet? We're still running through all that distortion. But what's coming in is absolute silence. And you can see that at the bottom, well, we may or may not be able to see. Maybe I can adjust this. You can see what it says here is RMS minus 121. I'm doing all this intense distortion, and the noise floor of the plugin going through all that distortion here, and I can also turn one of them off. Going through these plugins is lowering down to the noise floor of the denormalization noise that I've put in here. See, now it's 151. If Macity was on and it's distorting further, it becomes like 121. And if I bypass both of them, it would go down to like negative infinity or whatever. Here's the thing. If we're distorting everything this hard, like this hard. And it was a real thing, we'd be getting a bunch of background noise. I don't need to have the denormalization noise so faint that it drops down to minus 121 with 2 stacked full crank plugins blasting as hard as they possibly can. It would not be unreasonable to set the denormalization noise louder so that if we're doing this stuff and we're distorting that hard, you can kind of hear a little background noise in there. And that's our job today, is altering the YHighpass specifically so that I'm getting a louder denormalization noise because it's there already. The denormalization noise here, and that's going to ask me to close that. There we go. Oh, did I in fact make that change? Let's go and see before I return to this. Open recent, noise for test is going to be recent. Ah, I didn't. Well, let's do that over again. Silence. And then a nice little fade out, just because why not? This time we will save it. So here's the thing. Let's alter this aggressively and show you how this works. Because my template has this at all times. It has if abs input sample is less than thing, input sample equals thing. This is a gate. This is looking for silence, or nearly silence, and replacing it with noise at about the same level. Although, that's a fair question, because the thing is FPD is a very high amplitude thing, but we're making it be very low amplitude. So basically, we might have some adjusting to do here. First thing we can do is, let's see what we get when FPD is much, much louder. Instead, it's multiplied by FPD times 1.18 E minus 7. And that scientific notation, that means the decimal point is 7 places in this direction. So it's 0.00000000118. And we're going to see what that does. We're going to see what that does right now. It may make a loud blast of noise, or it may be not all that relevant. It's probably not an insanely loud blast of noise, but we're going to find out. And I would like to move this to where I can click it. Like I told you, I can only move my mouse in tiny little increments because I only have half an inch of space on my desktop. But we just got there. So well, we are experimenting and seeing what that does. First thing to do, let's see what it's like at actual full crank. Is this a deafening blast of noise? It totally is. Alrighty. Jazz's suggestion is 1IE-20. Let's see what we got. He may actually be quite right. But it's not necessarily correct, but it is probably closer to getting us in the zone. So we'll go with the Jazz suggestion. And one thing we did find out there is that the number that we're using is far higher than we need. So 120 is a bunch of decimal places further on. This we're not doing super loud audio, but one thing we are doing, now we have our silence, and the RMS thing is going to show how loud that noise floor really is. Eventually. And it's at about minus 208 where that stands. That's going to be higher than it was before, clearly. But that's quiet enough that it might actually be worth seeing what our effect stack tells us. If we do our effect stack, we're now at minus 168 with everything cranked up all the way. So interestingly, going to minus 7 was far louder than we needed, but going to minus 20, we still have room to make it be a little bit louder. So let's quit out of there and continue doing that change. We'll split the difference a little bit. And when we follow up, we will do that with input sample. Although it might be worth not doing this too aggressively because we're really looking for only samples of absolute silence to put in this noise floor. Thing is, well, we'll see. I'm going to dial it in and then figure out what we need. Because what I'd like to do is step it up so that firstly I want to be able to hear this noise generation. I'd like to hear what that's giving us. And then secondly, I want to do this replacing stuff and hear how sounds enter into that noise floor and have that happen gracefully as well. I believe we'll be able to do it. Basically, I'm coming up with some more magic numbers for what this is going to be related to what a noise floor actually is relative to the sounds of these samples and silences relative to when we're distorting stuff to crap. Because only then do I want our denormalization noise to start sounding like an analog noise floor. If we're not distorting stuff to crap, I don't want it to show up. I want it to be good and quiet. This is not going to be a thing of making everything have audible noise as we go. I want to have to stack up distortion factors in order to be hearing any noise out of silence. So we'll build this one at minus 14. And we'll see how intense our noise floor test is now that we've done that. Okay, that's pretty loud. Now it's fading out and it's going to cut off. Not bad. I hear a background noise with all this distortion. And on the fly, now if I turn this down, we're only hearing this when both of them are cranked up all the way. And that is a noise floor of about 40 dB down. And it's sounding pretty nice. I am satisfied with how that is. I could make it be a little quieter though, because we don't really need this to be a loud rush of noise. Mainly I just want it to turn into audible noise when we've got a bunch of distortion stacked up. The real noise floor is of course going to be like this. Maybe not quite like that. Let's put these to unity gain. My mouse is only letting me move a ½ an inch in every direction. I'll be fixing that eventually. But I'll get this. See, now that's unity gain. And so now the RMS is adjusting bit by bit to what the actual noise floor is, and it's looking to be about minus 108. Without doing all the distortion, this is how much noise floor a single stage would add. And if we have all the distortion on separate stages, then they're going to have amounts of additional noise based on how many cascaded stages of distortion we add. So we don't need it to be this loud. Minus 108 is still kind of loud. And so we're going to continue to adjust. Here's our CPP file, and we can add a couple of more order factors here. 17 might be interesting. We'll do 17. And let's see what we get out of there. Is that quiet enough? Because there was 37 before, so that's like 20 decimal points louder, while still being a thing that you have to crank the gain way up in order to be able to actually hear it. Over to our noise floor test. We're at full crank again. And we're going to fade out. And it's going to cut. And now we cannot hear the noise very obviously. It's at about 100 dB down. And if we cut the gains on these guys to roughly unity gain, oh hello, it became nan. That's because it was negative infinity at a point there. We're at 160 dB down. And remember, this is only kicking in when we're hitting silence, so this is not going to replace the noise floor of actual audio coming in while we process it. This is going to kick in when we have denormalization happening. So we're not having this noise floor replacing the noise floor of real audio, nor is it going to interfere with the resolution of like 24-bit sine waves and things by adding noise where it shouldn't belong. It's only kicking in when we have silence going on. The next step is to bring in where that silence happens, but this is looking pretty good. Like, if I crank MACD up all the way, we're still at 130 or so dB down, and, CD sample rate, CD noise floor is like 96 dB down. And if we've got all of these things distorted, we're still looking at, that's maybe about 20 dB dynamic range. It's enough where if we're distorting like in mad things, let's add yet another MACD and distort even more. Boom, there it goes. If we add enough of those, we can finally hear it. That's YHighpass, MACD, and MACD cascaded. And this is making an audible noise. So I'm going to say that seems about right. If I turn this down a hair, it quietens up nicely. And then as it gets over to, I'll pad the very output. And here's where we can't actually hear it. In a moment, the audio will come around. Well, not in a moment. Eventually, the audio will come around again to the beginning of the sample, and we'll hear the drums going through all of this. When? I don't know. Oh no, it's going to be far too long. This is like a 6-minute track. So rather than do that, let's skip. Click on this bit here. So this is about as distorted as you could possibly ever get. even as it fades, full crank. And then it cuts off because we switch to silence, and that's when we start getting our proper noise floor going. So we'll shut that off, and we'll save that. And it's looking like that's gonna be good for our level. So the next thing that we're gonna do is start playing with this number. This number is pretty darn close to like 0 of absolute zeroness. There's very little room here. It's only kicking in when literal silence is happening. I'm wondering whether there is going to be a place where it would be nice to merge into that noise floor. And so what we're going to do is pick the same volume level for starters and see what that does on a different one. First, let's build it. My thinking is that this might not be exactly right, and I'll be explaining to you what I need it to be going in. But firstly, I'm going to replace our noise floor test because we no longer need it exactly as it was. With a different version that has a whole bunch of fade outs. So let's hit shift period or greater than sign a whole bunch of times. This is taking a little while. I think maybe what I'm going to want to do is also throw in an amplify stage. And we're going to be monitoring it strictly using the distortion crush model because there's going to be nothing to hear under normal listening. I could have done with shortening this too, but it's all good. We'll figure it out. This gives me plenty of range for repeatedly shrinking it down to next to nothing. And the end parts of this long, 7-minute long practically bit of audio are going to be what's closer to silence. Let's test that assumption. Noise floor test. Full crank. We don't actually need these to be open at this stage because they're just going to do their thing, but it has my new alteration. Super distorted. So that is giving me a nice silence effect. I'm just not sure if it's going to literal silence. I feel like when I had literal silence, let's test that. So this bit from the 6 over is going to be literal silence, so I will be able to test it. Now let's go back to our stack. This should give us a quiet noise floor if the literal silence is working. Let's add another MACD. Yep, there we go. We'll save that since now we are using it. Everything's turned way down here There's a noise floor. Interesting. So here's kind of what I'm wondering. That's full crank. That's full crank. Let's just make this really loud. So there's our silence noise. And that's the audio being replaced. So we're going to try to get to this noise from here. I want it to blend into that noise rather than simply replace it. Because what we got now, this is capable of going to a level of silence and then the noise kicks in. And that is not what I want. Also, I will literally die if I blast into this other stuff with everything that's cranked out. So let's make this other part be silenced too, just in case. And let's save this as it is, just in case I forget. And then let's save this too. And we're going to get the nice interpolation into the denormalization noise. I wanted to, ooh, my stomach's growling. I need to go and make myself a hot dog once I'm finished doing the streaming. I've got about 45 minutes left to go. And then I have samples to make, and then I have a track to mix. This is going to be an exciting day. Where was I? Okay, so if input sample is less than this incredibly tiny amount, input sample gets large. FPD is larger than 1. That's why it's doing what it's doing. I have FTP PD multiplied by something that's making it be a noise level at the correct volume. But input sample being less than 118E minus 17 is switching on the distortion at a level that is far too low. Mind you, it's switching on rather than replacing. So if I really want it to merge into it, I should not be doing equals. I should be doing plus equals. I don't know whether that's going to make it more cumbersome, because if it's below this level, then it could be in denormalization territory. But I do know that if I'm adding that, it'll be bringing in another stage. So let's see what we can do here. If I knock 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 4 decimal positions off of that, what should we get? And we've also got the plus in here, so we're now adding what is a, oh, hang on. Forgot to quit out of here. We're now adding the noise, and we're kicking it in much earlier, because it was doing a thing where the amplitude was going way down and then abruptly kicking in, and the noise that we switched on was much louder than the silence that had been going before. Let's put our cursor way over here to start with, and go for our effects stack again. I think I'm hearing the noise kicking in. I believe the sound I'm hearing is the noise beginning to take over. It's sort of making it breathe a little bit. I think I can live with that though. And there's that silence. Yeah, it's having an interesting effect here. And that's our final volume level. Oh, hang on, honey, don't do that. So there's our full crank. Yeah, it's having this interaction. That interaction shouldn't be as loud as this. Maybe the adding is not what I want. And then we switch over to this at this stage, where the silence is, where the noise is. Let's quit out of here and fool with it a little bit more. We'll cut it in a little later and return to the switching over to the actual noise factor, because I want to see what that does. I want to see it kind of merge from a incredibly quiet sound into just noise in some musically useful way. It doesn't have to act like literal dither, because this is not literal dither. It's meant to only kick in when it's silent, but let's see what we can get. Effect stacks, noise floor test. What have we got now? We made it a little bit subtler. Something's going on with our noise floor here. Getting a little sputtery. So it kicks in around here, but where the original one kicked in was around here. So that's maybe not so good. We're going to keep increasing it. Let's go to 16. Let's see if we can exaggerate it somewhat. Because I'd like the sound of those drums to not sputter in quite that way, or the sound of the noise to sort of jump outwards from... It's hard to describe. Not a perfect system. I have a particular behavior in mind. And remember, all of this is at impossibly quiet sounds. Point being, I have this sound that works as a noise floor style silence that's going to do better for denormalization. It is also a positive only sound, and I can probably demonstrate that with a clip from this. I can probably show you on the meter, or show you in the waveform window. Hello. So, noise floor test. This is going to be audible. And there's our actual noise floor. So where the drums were, they were still louder than... I want the noises that they make to be quieter as they transition to that other sound. However, like I said, let's demonstrate that bit. No document with selection. All this is incredibly quiet. FX stacks, noise floor test, apply and close. So I believe, there we go. This is a way that I can zoom in on the volume of it. Here's our audio. It's on both sides of the waveform, as you can see. You can kind of see that middle part in there. And then we transition over to literal silence. I'll scooch over to here. That's not quite what I expected. It does seem to be bipolar. I thought it was going to be unipolar. Oh, I know why. See, what's going on here is each of these denormalization stages within an individual plugin are unipolar. So as it's coming out of YHighpass, it is only a positive result. Thing is, it's going through 2 stages of MACD at full crank. MACD has MACD has built-in high-pass filters. It's constraining the audio so that the super highs and the super lows aren't getting through. And that's even while I'm distorting it insanely. So what's happening is we're running something that is DC offset through a high-pass filter, which is recentering it again. So I'm not going to see the output of the literal denormalization stuff here. I'm running it through several other plugins. So that was maybe a bit of a waste of time, but whatever. Let's see what we get with... Well, it didn't take us all the way there, so let's call it -18. There's a sort of nice little parallelism here where it's 118, E18. It doesn't mean anything. It's just kind of fun. And we'll build, and we'll see what we get out of this. I'm very interested in how these go into the noise floor. Because remember, previously we had like 118E-37. So we clearly don't have to be as quiet as that, but if we're the same as this, it's actually cutting in too early. With a bit of luck, I'll still have time to make this be a high-pass filter and fool with that. But this is kind of important because if this works, I'm going to put it into Y low pass and update that on the fly. And I might be putting this into a whole bunch of things that I use frequently, such as like Console 7, stuff where I don't necessarily have the gumption to update literally everything and rebuild it all and all that, but I can do some things. So with this degree of complete overload, we've got a kind of sound coming out of it. And there's our hiss. It's still louder than the hiss as it cuts out. That's why it's doing that gating effect. So yeah, we're still not there yet. when it was minus 37, it was too much, but this minus 18 is not enough. So we're going to try like minus 20 and keep stepping in this direction. Or 21, because why not? Because my intuition says, let's try that. That's the thing with this kind of stuff, is it can be hard to define the desired behavior out of just rationalizing it and going, oh, this should be to this dB of this and that and the other thing. That's not always helpful. I have to contrive a situation where I can hear what it's doing and then work out in my head what I want it to sound like when it's doing this. Like here. Oh, loud. And that's sounding pretty clean. Here we have just plain noise. Here we have it entering into the noise. And I'm still hearing that gatiness. And then the intermediate stuff, it's altering the sound of the drums. And I remember it was kind of sounding like this a little bit even when it was just plus something. So the replacing with the noise source seems fine to me as well. But we're manipulating the texture of these borderline parts. Hopefully so that the stuff that's just on the bottommost fringes of everything is creating a desirable tonal effect under these circumstances. Like what's going to sound like the bottom noise floor of an analog device as it starts to interfere with the audio passing through it. Because you can kind of hear it in there. It's bringing out some of the kick drum. It's bringing out some of the lows in interesting ways. And I think it's still too loud. We're going to go farther. Let's go way farther. Let's go to 27 and see what it does. At what point do we have it starting to go down to silence and only then bringing in the noise abruptly? Because it can. What we had in the most extreme behavior was pristine, completely fine audio up to that point where it literally switched to zero and then a noise appeared out of nowhere. And that's what I don't want to have happen. $27. I'm liking that sound as entering into noise kind of sound. But it's still too loud. Here's our noise. And here's our sound, and our sound is louder than the noise is when the noise kicks in. Those percussive things should be less distorted. They're like switching back and forth between the noise and the sound. Yeah, we didn't go quite far enough. I know that 37 is too much. How about 34? I'm trying to get it to the opposite extreme. Because the thing is, in this weird context, this is showing me what it needs to be to have a nice, powerful, denormalized signal that will behave like analog noise sources in a complicated structure of a mixing system. with lots of internal distortion and stuff. Like if there isn't any internal distortion, it should be clean and pristine as anything. You won't be picking up any noise off of it, and it won't act like this is an analog desk, therefore it's all hissy and stuff. But when you distort stuff like crazy, and when you have stuff that drops into denormalization when it's fed silence, this should be fixing it. Hang on. I want to switch over to here. Now what do we got? Interesting, it's kicking in at about the same place. I know I'm making changes here, but it's just like if we were literally waiting for 0, waiting for utter silence, it would kick in here. And it's kicking in all the way up here. Screw it, let's go directly to -37 and see what that acts like. If this is still giving me the same behavior, then I've missed something somewhere. We do seem to be updating. You got to check to make sure that you're updating the right thing. I'm making a plugin, and I'm running the plugin that I'm making. So we should be changing this as we go. That's another thing to watch out for, is if I'm replacing the wrong one, then all the alterations I'm doing aren't actually having an effect. But here's what concerns me. It's been the same for several times. Let's take it considerably beyond what it previously was. This should be giving me a thing where it doesn't kick in until it's literally silence. Let's go even farther. 57. I'm attempting to make it so that it will not turn on until I want it to. It will not turn on until the place that had literally been set to 0, literal 0. And if there are any... Although, if this is being saved at 24-bit, maybe that's what's causing it. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that would be it. So I think I see what went wrong. Here's why this is not working for me. We'll go back, and what I'm going to need to do is work with this and save it at as 32-bit floating point or something like that. So we're going to go back into this, but we need to do this a different way. And I'm going to see if I can figure out how to do it. Firstly, I can certainly bring this in, but we're going to lose half of it. And this output is no plugin at the moment. That's way louder than the part I'm concerned with. So what we're going to do is, firstly, see if we can resave this as something else. Will you let me use 32-bit? You will let me use that as fixed point. Okay. Well, that'll help anyway. And then select all and a bunch of fade outs. Same as before. We're going to get this down to way below the noise floor of 24-bit fixed point. And then, since that's not actually going to be silence, we're going to put a little silence in at the end. Like this. And then we're going to save it as 32-bit fixed point. I think I'll reopen it just to make sure that's what it is. And looking good. Now we're going to go into our effects stacks and definitely click over here so we don't hurt ourselves. And there's our background noise. There's our drums. And now we're going to try to make it so that it will transition gracefully from one to the other. Now we have a range that will work. So we're hearing it fade out, but not actually turn into noise quite the same way. We can't hear the drums any longer, but we hear the noise sort of sputtering. I do anyhow. So we're wanting that funny quantization-y sounding thing to be slightly more prevalent rather than dropping into silence and then having the noise floor sputter back into existence. Okay, so back to where we were at. If apps input sample, let's cut this in a little bit earlier and see where we get. I think that's what we tried at first, but we didn't have this set up properly. And we're building and rebuilding our plugin and dragging it into here. Now we've made it so it switches to the noise sooner. We might need to make it switch to the noise later. In fact, I think it's very likely that we will. That's for test. There's the noise. There's our audio. Yeah, it's definitely kicking in the noise too soon. So rather than have it be a larger number, we'll have it be a smaller number. Like, we'll see what 23 gets us. That should hang on to the audio longer. And that's going to cause that quantization-y kind of thing where the audio starts to grind as the noise floor kicks in. And now we're at a dynamic, well, no, that's not true either. Hang on. Let's test it and see. There's a noise. You can still barely hear the drums. We hear the noise kind of coming in. I think this is going to work. It's not really interfering, but every step of the way it's kind of going into the noise floor. I can hear the noise floor coming in. And I can just barely hear the last hints of drum in there. And as it fades out into complete silence and the noise floor being there, the last bits of drum I can hear are about at the level of the noise, and that's more or less what I'm after. Like we can kind of hear it transitioning. That's the way it should transition into noise. And we can hear the noise peaking out here, but that's fine. And then when it's louder, this is incredibly quiet. And there's just a hint of noisiness, but that's about at the amplitude that the final noise will be. I think we got there. I think we got there. And then louder, of course, is louder and louder and louder and louder. Because this is, of course, at the denormalization noise floor. And we can crank it up to be just barely audible, but we have to do so many stages of additional distortion in order to do it. That I would call a result. So you know that the next thing that we do here comes from here. Now that we've got an update for this, and the rest of it should be behaving pretty much normally, we're going to find where this is done, which is this here. We're going to take this stuff out, and we're going to make this be like this. Again, with my words. I have to work too hard. I stop being able to use words. This is a low pass. This is not. So this is going to have all of these in the same places, but we need to make the following changes. Where it says this stuff, that doesn't change. These lines also are not changing, but these lines here are. So we're going to start with 1.0 divided by times k plus k, so that was fine. For the high pass, instead of having k times norm, it's going to become just norm. And instead of being 2, it'll be -2. And this one is also correct. And this one's not being altered, and this one's not being altered. So that should be everything we needed to know. Let's see what we got. It's time to find out what the YHighpass that has been updated to have this new denormalization behavior. Oh, and I see a comment in chat. This has not been the chattiest of chats, but putting a really subtle and bright reverb always active on bass is not going to give back dynamics after compression. That said, just if it's complete and total insanity doesn't make it a bad idea. Try it, see if it sounds cool. Maybe you're overthinking it. Why would you be thinking of it in terms of get back some dynamics if you're looking to just make it do something else? That might make it do something else in a useful way. So, alien cadenzas. So we'll cut off some of this insane boost, and if we had a YHighpass it'd be kind of like this. I'd say that seems respectable enough. If we resonate it, it does this. Oh yeah, it's going to go right down into the Halon. No, I am not. So we're getting distortion. Let's use res edge. Oh, interesting. So if we throw a lot of resonance on there and then drop the frequency, we can cut the level to just exaggerate it. What's going to get really fun is trying the increasing res edge, because we've got it dialed back to where res edge is very small now. I'm going to do this on that drum track too. So this becomes something where we can add a note to kick drums and mixes through doing this. And then as we start increasing res edge, it's going to get nasty. Gnarly. And let's add even more edge. A little less resonance, but all the edge gets us a real sputtery kind of quality. So that's aggressive. And last we got a weird way of adding punch to a mix by making punch out of just strangeness. It's got a little crackle in here. So we're adding this to this. But of course in a full mix that's terrible, so what we're going to do is close this and open a different sound, like drum tracks. Because I think we got there. I think we got to the new version of YHighpass and the update to YLowpass that will give me better denormalization behavior. I think we've got that dialed in, and so we'll be able to replace what's in the template and what's in a bunch of other plugins with the new setting. So we'll take this and transform it into a bizarre electro sound like this. There you are, YHighpass with the res edge for a strange and nasty electro distortion. And then we can combine that with dry, taking the normal drum sound and everything gets just a little funny edge. There are people who are going to be able to make use of this. I think it fits in some of the gnarlier drum and bass and industrial techno zones. Being able to take a track and mess it up like this. Very kind of gatey. So we can go from the dry of this to accentuated. And use res edge to dial that back. And the thing about this is it's causing a more percussive effect. It still sounds like vaguely natural, only not, but we can switch from the natural sound to using YHighpass to accentuate the resonance on that kick in a way that's also distorting and glitching. That's pretty big sounding. It's nasty, but it's big sounding. And if you don't like it being that nasty, you can also dial back the gain. More edge. That's a complete reshaping of how the drums are working. Because without this, we've got this. Without adding a kick drum mic, we can turn it into this. Our filter is hyping out the kick so much so our kick is super boosted this way, and dry, it's not really there. You bring in a little bit of it in, and we don't have a kick drum mic on this particular set of microphones, but now we do. And the thing about it is, if we just only were doing a resonant filter with distortion, it would sustain more. What's happening here is that res edge is causing it to be gatier. It's causing it to clip out. So we can kind of dial it in. We don't need that much of it, like halfway. That's already an awful lot. Nothing? And if we can just begin to hear the crackle on the edge of it. Bypass. And then listen to the kick come in. Oh wait, that was cool. I want to hear that again. And then of course we have this control, which is smoothed, so you can like automate it. And if we want that to be even more obvious, so if you have this in some more reasonable setting, you can always kick it on for a particular beat if you wanted a nasty electro sting. And it'll come out of the sound in an interesting way. Yeah, so you have it starting to crackle too much only when desired. Like you go to here. It's like having a synthesizer in the mix based on the kick drum that's doing a sort of gnarly, crackly thing. And the nice thing about that is if you had such a synthesizer, it would be kind of like a bizarre, glitchy analog synthesizer rather than sounding particularly digital, because the glitchiness that this produces kind of vibes like electricity going terribly wrong. I think we got there. Let's just fool with it a little tiny bit more, though. One final thing. How about this? This is a bassy track. And you hear what it sounds like when not all glitchy. So full wet, unity gain. Frequency can start really low. No resonance and no edge. Now, if I did let it be a little resonant, it'll steepen that up a little bit. How resonant sounds good. I guess I can resonate it quite a bit. So doing it this way means I can get the desired sound and take out some of that extreme lowness. And then if I wanted to accentuate the deepness, I could go here. Because it's hard to hear that kick. Too much distortion. Definitely tricky. It's a weird mix to work with. Definitely hard to get that kick drum out. Oh, no, there we go. There's where the bass is. the edge. Res edge is unusual, I'll just say that. Does this. Interesting. What do we have here? So I'm trying to find where that kick drum is that's almost invisible behind the bass. That's very subby. Okay, so that's where the kick drum is. It's just barely not there. Yep, so that's challenging. But if it was able to try to isolate the kick drum out of that particular mix, then I think I have something there. That ought to work. Oh, one more thing to play with, I think. Unless I was already doing this. Was I already doing this? I think maybe I was already doing this. On drums. Yeah, I think I was doing this earlier. So we can resonate that, but we can also resonate other frequencies. Down into the subsonics. And then as we add edge, we get an edge on the resonation, which is subsonic. So that's a lot of punch being added to the kick drum. Raw. There's a goodly amount of punch being attached. Dry, and then we bring in a little of this effect that is set up to distort and act kind of flaky, And it's kind of adding an imaginary punchy bass drum mic. Without. Well, that was cool. Let's do that again. Okay, it doesn't keep doing that, but clearly a side effect from bypassing it. That's fun. So there's a good aggressive sounding bass drum that doesn't actually exist in the recording. It is the distorted quality that's causing it to be a little more gatey, and it's the resonance that's causing that particular thing to jump out. The resonance is interacting with something that's barely there. That's an even punchier sound. Yep, this is going to work. This is going to work, and I'm going to call that a day and return to my sampling of Blinken synthesizers behind me. Cool beans. Cool beans, a good day at the office. Thank you for hanging out with me, those of you who have been hanging out with me. It's always a little bit difficult to tell. As long as anybody gets some use out of it, I figure that's fine. And on that note, I will say goodbye to Chat, who's been kind of sitting there the entire time. It's not the chattiest chat in the world, but that's fine. Maybe at some point people will be chatting so much that I won't even know what to do with myself and I won't be able to code. But for now, we're covering everything. And on that note, I will talk to you folks later. I will probably be putting out YHighpass next Sunday because it'll be an opportunity to also do YLowpass and maybe revisit some other things as well with that new denormalization stuff, because I was using it and running into that problem. And I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.